Prepare yourself for the terror. The prison of madness, where few enter and none return.
Welcome to Unsung Horrors. With Lance. And Erica.
Leave all your sanity behind. It can't help you now.
Welcome to another episode of Unsung Horrors, the podcast where we discuss underseen horror movies, specifically those with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. I'm Erica.
And I'm Lance.
And we have a very special episode this week. First, we're going to be talking about The Savage Hunt of King Stakh from 1979, which, as of this recording, has 661 views. And it has a Blu-ray release from Deaf Crocodile, which is currently available to order on Diabolic DVD with 3 options, which we will discuss shortly. And here to talk about the film and the release, we have Craig and Dennis from Deaf Crocodile. Welcome.
Hey,
Hello.
Thanks for having us on.
So first and foremost, for anyone, I think most of our listeners are familiar with Deaf Crocodile. Can you tell folks a little bit about your label and like what you're really kind of focused on and like what you hope people will discover through your releases?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we end up putting out is stuff that Dennis has been aware of over the years and it's like, oh, that would be really cool to be able to track that down. And he's really good at tracking things down that are hard to find. So that's why almost all of our releases have been met with, wow, that looks good. I've never heard of it. Because, yeah, they're just obscure, really good films that for whatever reason most people haven't seen. So we're always thrilled to be able to expose these great films to new audiences. As far as what we're focused on, a lot of our stuff tends to meet at the crossroads of like art house and genre, mostly because we kind of like that. But also, it's hard to pin down exactly what you'd say our focus is, because a lot of people for a while were referring to us as that's the company that puts out all those Eastern European or Russian films. That's just because as you find one film and you find the people who have the materials for that, it just leads to other films in that area. By this time next year, they'll probably be saying, oh, that's the company that puts out all those old animated titles, because we've got a lot of animation coming. It's not a concerted effort to be like, oh, this is what we're going to put out. We're just looking for really good films that people haven't seen. Leads us where it leads us.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Like, you're putting out films that are underseen, like, so you're the perfect guest for our show because we're here just championing, the underseen horror films. But I think my introduction to Deaf Crocodile was actually through Lance because of Solomon Kane.
Oh, yeah.
And, so that one's very different from, if anyone's just sort of generalizing you as Eastern European, like, look at that release. I mean, that's fantastic.
That one was pretty special. And that one started with Dennis's vinyl record collecting. So he should tell you how that one came about.
Yeah, no, I've been collecting records since I was about 15, and was at Record Surplus, which is one of my favorite stores over on the west side of LA, Santa Monica and Centinela, and they had a copy of the soundtrack to Solomon King, which is an independent black crime film that was made in Oakland, California in 1973-74 by a filmmaker, actor, writer, producer named Sal Watts, who was kind of like Oakland's answer to Berry Gordy in the 70s. He had record labels, made movies. He produced a local TV program that showcased Oakland street dance and soul funk artists, had a string of restaurants, and he had a chain of Mr. Sal's black urban fashion stores. So he was doing amazing stuff. And I found the soundtrack, and it had all these incredible and mostly unknown local Oakland soul funk artists on it. And I said, wow, let me see if, track down the film and watch it, and quickly discovered that had not been seen since the late 1970s, and every reference was a lost film, no footage. I think there was a 30-second TV spot on YouTube, and that was the only footage that existed. So I talked to Craig, and I said, well, it's a lost film, and it's kind of what we do. We find lost films.
Yeah.
So we'll go find this one. And we did. It took a couple of years of searching. We eventually found out that Sal had passed away in 2003, pretty much completely unknown at the time for his work in media, in music and film and TV. And we located his wife, his widow, Belinda Burton Watts, who also appears in Solomon King at the end, and was in charge of the estate. And we made an arrangement, a deal with her. She's been incredible to work with. And then after much searching, we located, we think, the only complete print of the original version of the film at the UCLA Film and TV Archive, which they very generously loaned for the restoration. We normally don't use release prints for the purposes of restoration, but in this case, it appears the negative was lost many years ago. No OCN, no interpositive, internegative. There was this one release print. It was badly faded and had a lot of wear and tear. And so we scanned it, and then Craig is our restoration wizard and worked his incredible magic. And then our colorist, Tyler Fagerstrom, was able to restore about 95% of the color of this badly faded purple print. It is unbelievable. If you get the Blu-ray, we even have a before and after test where you can see. And it premiered at Fantastic Fest, and we've had a bunch of screenings. And the amazing thing is that Sal and Belinda's family, kids, grandkids, great nephews, great nieces have been able to see this film, come to screenings. They'd heard about it for years. And were never able to appreciate Sal's work.
Yeah, most
also,
of the family had never seen it.
Oh, yeah, it was just this kind of myth that, oh, yeah, we heard Sal made a movie, but there's no way to see it. So that, and the chance to work with Belinda has really been the best thing about Solomon King. We did a long interview with her. Jonathan Marlowe is a good friend of ours, up in Northern California, sat down and talked with her for over 2 hours. And that interview about her life, Sal's life and career, Oakland in the 1970s, Black music culture, to me is as important in its way as the film itself, which really documents a lot of the long gone, like, geography, fashion, music, everything of Black culture in Oakland at that time. And from almost like a documentary sense, that's one of the great things about Solomon King. It's also super fun. I mean, he was one of the few Black independent filmmakers working at that time, along with like Rudy Ray Moore and Melvin Van Peebles, and was clearly trying to make a commercial action crime film, and just had great fun with it with very limited resources. They shot a lot of it either in his house or businesses that he owned. A lot of friends and family appear in it. So it really is a truly independent production with an amazing soundtrack. So I know that's a long explanation, but we love Solomon King. We loved working with Belinda. Cannot say enough good things. And she's just become a really dear friend. I mean, that more than anything has been like the best thing. And she says, so amazing. She said, I was waiting for 30 years for the phone to ring and someone to call and say, hey, we want to find Solomon King. And she said the phone finally rang and it was you and Craig. And she's like, I think it was like divine blessing. And I agree with her. I think it's so remarkable, a miracle that we were able to work with her and restore and bring Sal and her's work back to the screen.
So both Lance and I were at the Solomon King screening at Fantastic Fest, and
wow.
it was such a great experience. That movie is just pure DIY joy.
Yeah, really special premiere with Sal Watts' family there and stuff. It was the highlight of
having the family there was amazing, and we screened it again in San Francisco, so a lot more of the family was able to be there, and it was just incredible. Like the first scene where he's on screen, I just heard, one of the women sitting behind me just yelled out. She's like, "That's my daddy!"
It's the best.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And it was licensed for Turner Classic Movies and screened twice on TCM nationally. And to me, that's incredible that Sal had this amazing kind of drive and chutzpah and did all these things, movies and music and TV and fashion. And we'd like to know more, actually. We're hoping that somebody will at some point pick up on the costumes in the film. Apparently a lot of the clothes were off the rack from Mr. Sal's fashion stores. And there was one designer in particular, whose name I'm, of course, now forgetting. But we tried to see if we could find any information about his work and found absolutely nothing. But apparently designed most of the clothes that Mr. Sal sold and were subsequently used in Solomon King. And we're like, this guy. Yeah, there was some incredible clothing in that. Yeah, and you can see there's some photos from the TV show that Sal produced, Jay Payton shows. That's right. Yeah, I think. And also used those clothes, which are just mind-blowing. So we're hoping somebody at some point will find out some more information and give some more background on the career of the fashion designer, because his work was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, it's just insane that someone like Sal Watts, and then also it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of the designer's name. But both of them had such incredible lives and careers, and like there's nothing. Like we've searched high and low, and like it's hard to find any information. So we were really hoping, especially once we heard the full interview with Belinda, somebody needs to make a documentary. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
If we had the time and we would love to have done it ourselves. But like a full documentary just about Belinda and Sal and Oakland at that time would be so fascinating, and having Belinda at the center of it, because her storytelling ability is off the charts.
And she's really the main source for all the background. As Craig said, we were able to find very little, but she had some amazing family photos and her own personal memories. We kept hoping that we would find photos or even like a TV ad that was shot in Mr. Sal's back in the day. And we found nothing. We do have a business card. I'm actually looking at it right now. Mr. Sal's Fashions, Custom Designing and Tailoring, Unique Custom-Made Hats and Bags, Male and Female, 1738 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland. Telephone 465-2677, Sal Watts. And part of me is like, if I rang that number, would Sal pick up? So yeah, I know we've gotten sidelined as we often do, but we love Solomon King. That was one of our very favorite projects we've worked on.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you've never done a podcast with us before. You're usually only going to get one or two questions in.
No, it's fine. We're here to promote you guys and the work that you're doing. So, we'll get around to the King stock eventually.
Well, they both have King in the title, so there's a connection.
There we go. Yeah,
They could not be more different films. Although both were clearly filmmakers pursuing a very individual, like idiosyncratic vision. So
yeah, they both have
that links them.
Awesome costumes or outfits.
There you go.
And super fun. Just really movies that we fell in love with and just got really passionate. I mean, we actually committed to tracking down and restoring Solomon King, having seen no footage. Literally, I think 30 seconds.
Well, yeah, after you had got the record, you found a YouTube. It was a YouTube video, but there was no video. It was just the theme song.
Oh yeah.
And you had sent me a link, and you're like, I found this record. It's a lost film. We should try and find this. What do you think? And I clicked on it, and I heard the theme music. And I was like, I don't care what the movie is. If that's the music, we're finding this.
Yeah, no, and we it's one of those rare occasions where we kind of went after something sight unseen. There is a Mexican animated sci-fi film we've been pursuing for a couple of years, which is a lost movie, which, knock on wood, knock on my head, we may be close to licensing, but no footage exists of it. Nothing. No trailer, zippo.
Wow.
I think a couple lobby cards. And so this is one where it's that leap of faith. You're kind of like jumping off the diving board into the darkness, hoping that this is a really cool movie. But part of it is like, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Who's going to kind of be crazy enough to spend the time to track this down and have it scanned? And then we're so fortunate that Craig is such an incredible wizard at restoration, because we're able to take on these projects that, a lot of boutique labels can't do, because the restoration involved is so time consuming and so expensive normally. For Solomon King, we even had to do a Kickstarter because it was a really complicated and expensive project. But fortunately, we got a lot of amazing supporters on Kickstarter, and we're able
Lance being the biggest one.
That's true.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I fell in love. I think I had the same type of passion you guys did. As soon as I saw the trailer and all the stuff I watched the full interview with Belinda that y'all had shared, I was immediately sold, and I was like, I'm in all the way any way I can help.
Hey, I will thank you now enormously, because that's what helped us finish the film and get it out there. And now the other really cool thing is Belinda had what she thought was the camera negative in her closet for 25 years. And Craig and I were really excited, and we actually had a Zoom with her and her daughter. They pulled the cans out and started to unwind it, and Craig was like, "There's no image. There's no image." It's
when she pulled the stuff out of the closet and it was in boxes instead of cans, I'm like, I think that's audio.
Just audio.
So it turned out to be the 35 millimeter OST, which was great that we had really good audio, but it meant that we had the soundtrack and no picture. So that sent us back to the drawing board, and we eventually located the print at UCLA Archive. But at one point we were thinking, oh wow, we could put out the dialogue and the music, but there's not going to be any image.
You could do like the reverse New York Ninja thing, where they like made their own, like they had people record their own audio for it. So you've got the audio, and then you just have people acting with no sound, and then add that to it. I
know. Well, fortunately, we did find.
Yes, of course.
Find the picture to go with it, and so. And when we did a little 10-second test to see if we could restore the color, and realized we could, we shared it with Belinda, and she was like, "Oh my God, that's me and Sal's house. That I remember that painting on the wall and ... And
the car that Schibi bought her.
The car that he drives in the beginning was Belinda's car that might have given away to one of his other lady friends at one point. Sal had. From what we could tell, I think he had 14 children.
Oh,
so
wow.
he was busy guy.
Yeah. Not just in business,
not just in film and TV and music. So there's a lot of family who were able to sort of rediscover Sal's work, which is really wonderful.
Yeah.
I wish he'd made more movies. We would restore them all and put them out.
Yeah.
But Solomon King was the only one he got to make, I wish he had been more acclaimed and remembered during his lifetime. His career seems to have kind of collapsed in the late 70s and the early 80s. He actually went to prison on tax issues, really sad. He and Belinda faced just unbelievable racism throughout their lives, which she talks about very openly and honestly in the interview we did with her. So again, if people just rediscover Solomon King, I hope they track it down, watch the film, and then watch Belinda's interview, because they really complement each other so beautifully. So
absolutely. All right, so let's make our jump over to King Stakh, our different king here. I did want to give a quick summary, and this is pulled directly from where you can purchase it on Diabolic DVD. We have more ghosts than live people, murmurs the pale, haunted mistress of the mansion of Marsh Firs to a scholar of ancient folklore who has arrived at her castle to research the bloody legend of King Stakh, a murdered 15th century nobleman whose spirit supposedly thunders through the local woodlands. The Wild Hunt is a fixture of northern European folklore in which a sinister figure leads a chase followed by ghostly companions. Part folk horror, part supernatural mystery, King Stakh is a melancholy, chilling mixture of Terry Gilliam, Italian Gothic horror, 1960s Hammer films, and The Wicker Man, and a major rediscovery for genre fans. The longer the young scholar stays in the mysterious house of shadow, gloom, madness, and death, the more strange and surreal the imagery becomes. A mad widow in a white wig, a man bleeding spontaneously from his skull, a dwarf hiding in a decayed doll's house, screeching ravens, and maniacal puppet shows. So I did want to start, we're not going to follow our normal episode structure where we get into too much, like going down the line of cast and crew. We've got Craig and Dennis here, so we want to talk about the release and all the great special features that come with it. And then we'll get into our short discussion. So I mentioned 3 options for the film. There's a standard edition, a deluxe edition, and there's also a bundle available on Diabolic. So we'll start with the standard edition and go from there. First feature we have is, of course, a brand new restoration of the director's cut, and Craig did that himself. So, Craig, what was the restoration process like for this film? And do you like this kind of work, or do you find it, tedious and just kind of a necessary evil?
It depends on the day.
Okay.
Sometimes it's can be actually kind of relaxing, just kind of zone out and work on it. But other times it can be tedious, where if you've got a problem or an issue and you keep trying every tool in the box and it just doesn't want to fix, can get frustrating. There's even for King Stakh, there's actually a little restoration disclaimer at the head of the movie that we added, because this particular film, the only element was available was we didn't have a choice of elements, so we got what we got, and I believe it was a print that had some weird fading issues that kind of present sort of like flicker, but not like consistent like flicker. It's just more of a wavy, chromatic kind of thing that happens throughout the film. And I mitigated it a lot, as much as I could, but it's still kind of there, and you'll notice it. So I just wanted people to know that going in, that we were very aware of it, and it's a lot better than it was. Other than that, it's the usual, just dust and dirt and scratches and issues like that, which, every release has, that you just clean up the best you can.
I was going to say that when we were in negotiations with Belarus Film, who are the rights holders for Savage Hunt of King Stakh, they sent us a quote-unquote restoration that they had done recently. Craig looked at it and he said, this scene, I think, in a cemetery, and it's supposed to be lightly raining, and whatever scratch removal software had removed the rain.
Oh
wow! It just was gone. So we had to explain to them that we wanted to go back to the unrestored elements and start over again. That's something we do see. Like there are archives and studios that we work with that do really superb restoration work. Moss Film, the Alexander Petrushka films we put out. Most recently, Ruslan and Ludmilla. The new 4K restoration is gorgeous. The NFI in Budapest and Hungary worked with on Cat City and Heroic Times and Bubble Bath do wonderful restoration work.
Yeah, their work's incredible.
The Narodny Film Archive in Prague, we're releasing a restoration of Adela Has Not Had Supper Yet next month, which is their a man-eating plant detective spoof. This is fantastic, kind of Pink Panther-like comedy about a carnivorous plant.
I'm sold.
And super fun. Director Aldrich Lipsky, who did Lemonade Joe and Mysterious Castle and the Carpathians, which we put out a couple months ago from the Jules Verne novel. They do really wonderful work. Without naming names, we'll sometimes get elements that have supposedly been restored, and Craig looks at them and goes, "Ooh, wow, there's a lot of issues here." So I think standards for what is a restored movie and what isn't, they vary wildly. Craig does what I guess you would call studio level restoration for most of the projects. So it's kind of what you would expect from a major studio with far greater resources and much deeper pockets. But he's a perfectionist, and he's often working on the restorations. Literally, he's like, I know we're supposed to deliver this for authoring, but I looked at it again last night and I found a few things I just had to change. No, he's literally usually tinkering with things.
Dennis, I don't even know if you're aware of this, but there are occasions there's actually some stuff in King Stakh where I got the QC file back from David Mackenzie of Fidelity in Motion, and I'm QCing the Blu-ray, and I've seen things, and I've told him, I'm like, hey, I need to send you a couple pickups.
Still, it continues.
That's funny. So the film has a video introduction by Kayla Janice, who most people know for her documentary Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, A History of Folk Horror. Did you reach out to her to do the intro because this film was mentioned in her documentary, and this film clearly falls within the folk horror genre, or did she reach out to you when she found out you were putting this out?
No, I reached out to her. We've been friends for a while. I'm a huge admirer of her work as a filmmaker and as a writer. One of the supporters for the crowdfunding on her new book on Monty Hellman's Cockfighter that's coming out in a few weeks. Very excited to finally see that. And we had her as a guest at the Philosophical Research Society, the nonprofit I mentioned here in LA. They're executive director, and screened Woodlands Dark. Saw there was a brief mention of Savage Hunt of King Stakh, and I said, hey, we're restoring the film. Would you consider talking about it? And she very generously agreed to do it. And, she's such an amazing scholar of all of these incredible, not just folk horror, but for Woodlands Dark in particular, folk horror movies. And so I think she made the sort of perfect person to introduce the film for those who have never heard of it before, which is probably most film fans here in North America. It is really pretty obscure.
Yeah. So the disc also includes a new video essay by film historian Evan Chester, The Wild, Wild Hunt of King Stakh. And so I checked out his YouTube channel and actually watched a few of his short video essays there. How did he become involved with this release?
Craig, was it you had discovered, or one of us discovered his work on YouTube?
Yeah, I'd watched it. I think he had done one on Russian animation, and I was watching that, and I was like, oh, that was really good. And then I just clicked and I started watching some other ones. I'm like, this guy's really good. So I messaged him and I was like, hey, would you like to do basically one of the videos you do on YouTube, but do it for our Blu-ray release, and he was thrilled to do it, and so we were thrilled to have him do it.
He's now worked on visual essays for several of our other upcoming releases, and we really, really love his work and think it's a great compliment to the movies.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think a lot of people, I hear like Sam Deegan get asked this a lot, like, well, how do I get into that? How do I get on like special features? And it's like, well, do the work, find your niche, and like people will come to you, kind of thing. And like, this is a perfect example of that. Like, this guy is just like geeking out on some stuff that he really loves, and you can tell people are really passionate about their like that one subject. People will find it, and if they're doing something in line with that, will reach out to you. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think we're the first time he's done anything for a Blu-ray release. So yeah, he was a little surprised at first that we were like, he was like, you want to put it on a Blu-ray? We're like, yes, you do good work.
That's awesome. Yeah, so the artwork in King Stakh's release, you have some really great, to me, well-known comic artists. You have Stephen Bissett. Most people know his work from Swamp Thing and the Alan Moore run. And David Mack does some of the art for the slipcovers. But yeah, it's kind of surprising to see Stephen Bissett's name linked to an audio commentary, and he's worked with a couple of releases from you guys. So how did y'all meet him?
He's done a bunch of stuff for us now. I'm a comic book nerd, and
Me too.
grew up in New England, and he's from Vermont. And back in the late 80s was the first time. There was a very small comic book convention in Dover, New Hampshire, and he would attend it every year, and so did I, because it was near where I grew up. So we'd go in, and every year I'd see him, and he'd do a sketch for me, and I'd grab his latest issue of Taboo, which is a really incredible like horror anthology book that he put out, like usually one a year. And so I was just a fan of his for a long time. And then we were friends on Facebook, and I noticed that he would post really great in-depth reviews of films that he'd seen. And so I just reached out to him. I was like, hey, like, would you be interested in doing something for one of our releases? And he was excited to do it. So yeah, he's done some commentaries for us. He wrote an essay for us. He's been doing a lot more work with some other labels as well. And he's also, he wrote a lengthy book on The Brood, the film. I've seen that. You can get that on Amazon. It's quite a tome on one film. So he's a big film fan and film historian, just as a passion project, I think. It's just something he likes to do, and now it's turning into like a side gig that a lot of people I think are starting to reach out to him to get essays and interviews and whatnot with him on films.
Well, he actually was one of the first writers for Video Watchdog, and has been friends for decades with Tim Lucas and Tim's late wife Donna, who co-founded Video Watchdog. And so Steve has had this parallel career as a film writer, film scholar for decades, but was much better known for his work in comics. So I think he's really excited that he's finally getting a lot of attention for his incredible film scholarship and enthusiasm for a lot of the same kinds of movies, that we love. He's worked, I think, on most of our Alexander Petrushko Russian fantasy releases. The details and historical facts he's able to come up with are really astonishing. I think he has a network of fellow film lovers that he's able to reach out to who will do incredible sort of deep detective research into the release of these films, and he can bring
particularly the information and detail he gets on the cast members of these, obscure Eastern European films, and he'll have like their whole backstory of all the actors. It's really incredible. I like it's a very casual conversational style he has with his commentaries, even though they are packed to the gills with information, but it doesn't feel like information overload. And I think he's got a background in teaching, and I think that's really beneficial to he's got a good talent for dispensing information without it feeling overwhelming. He's really great at it. I'm so glad that he's done so many commentaries for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. So in addition to Bissett's commentary, you also have a commentary from Mike White of the Projection Booth. And he actually recently released episodes of some previous releases, The Unknown Man of Shandigor and Visitors from the Arcana Galaxy, both with Sam Deegan, and the latter with friend of the show, Ryan Verrill, which is awesome.
Ryan had mentioned that he was going to be doing something with him on one of our titles, but I didn't realize that they were going to be putting out, like, it was like 2 back-to-back that were our titles, and I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And his show is great. I mean, when I first started listening to it, at first I was like, seriously? Like, this podcast about this film is longer than the film itself. But it's never boring. It's always like, I mean, if you're a film nerd, like, yeah, he gets these great guests that have great insights, and I've never listened to an episode that I thought was like not entertaining or too long or anything. They're always great.
Yeah, I'm not trying to play favorites on episodes or anything, but like the Super Mario Brothers episode was one of the most amazing things I've ever heard in my life. Like all the interviews he got for that.
Was it the original Super Mario or the recent redone version?
Oh, the original, like the John Leguizamo
live action. Okay,
yeah, the live action one. And he got all the people who were involved with that movie, and it was just the most amazing feat. I can't even imagine him putting that thing together. But
wow,
yeah,
it is a pretty a little bit like the independent horror filmmaking community, where it's pretty tight and a lot of the people know each other. The community with, as you've mentioned, like Ryan and Sam and Mike and yourselves, like there's a lot of interconnectedness. People who support each other's work and
yeah, we're all nerding out over the same stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll work on releases by different labels. Craig and I are both big physical media fans and consumers. So, I have stacks and stacks of discs by other specialty labels, whether it's Severin or Mondo Macabro or Pino Lorber or, you name it. Many still in the shrink wrap, as I'm sure you all can appreciate.
I just bought 2 large bookshelves, not for books, they're for Blu-rays, but 2 large shelves because the stack of I need to watch this was just overwhelming.
So just to get into a few more of the people involved with the King Stakh release, you have the graphic design by Beth Morris. She's done some work for you previously on World War III and Kin Tsatsa. And the deluxe edition has everything in the standard edition, plus it has a hard slipcase with new artwork, and Lance mentioned David Mack. That work is just absolutely stunning. How did you first, you talked a little bit about meeting up with and getting involved with Bissett, but what about David and his artwork? How did you find out about his work and get him involved?
Again, my comic book nerd roots. Yeah, he's best known for creating Kabuki, which is a comic series, which I'd heard of, but I had never read. And then I'm a huge collector and fan of the Marvel Comics Daredevil series, and he wrote and drew that back in the probably late 90s, early 2000s, which then I discovered. I'm like, oh wow, this guy's incredible. And so I've been just a fan for a long time. Weirdly, yeah, everything's always tied together somehow. So I did some consulting on the new restoration and re-edit of Caligula. The gentleman who was heading that project, Thomas Nagovin, is how we got in touch with Dave McKean, because he's friends with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he also knows David Mack. So yeah, he had helped us get in touch with Dave McKean, who did a slipcover for us for a Kickstarter for Pied Piper. And then I knew that he also knew David Mack, so I was like, any chance you could put in a good word for us? And so yeah, he introduced us via email, and we were he was actually going to do a different title for us, and that fell through. But then he wanted to do this one, so yeah, I was just I had mentioned, when I talk to these comic book artist heroes of mine to do work for us now at Deaf Crocodile, and they say yes, it's it's kind of surreal. I'm like, oh wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've known David Mack's work from all his comic book work, and was thrilled that he agreed to do this one. And he's asked, he's like, yeah, I'd love to do another one. So when the right project comes up, you might see another one by him.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
You're familiar with him.
Yeah, I've met David a few times when we were both tabling at a comic convention selling art, and I've commissioned him to do some pieces. I have one of his Swamp Things up in my office. I even have a Stephen Bissette Swamp Thing that I was lucky enough to pick up from him, because he doesn't do art. He hasn't done art in decades, really.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of I don't have any original published work from Stephen Bissette, but I've got a bunch of sketches, like I said, that he would do for me every year. Way back in the day. So yeah, the comic book art is a near and dear to me. So we'll continue to reach out to people that have worked in that field and see if we can't get some cover art from them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's appealing to us comic nerds. Like when you see, the Dave McKean Pied Piper and then this David Mack, it's like, I'm gonna buy this. Even if you're not into films or something, it's a work of art. And as a collector,
and that's what we're really focusing on the deluxe editions, is that we're trying to get new artwork, and the slipcase is really to showcase the artwork that was created for the slipcase. So there won't be a lot of text on it. Keep it minimal, like the title, and that's about it.
Yeah. Right.
And that's how I pitch it to them when I'm trying to convince them to do one for us. Is like, this is just for the deluxe edition, just for the slipcase, and it's really to showcase your artwork. And yeah, so far they've been really beautiful. I'm very excited about the ones, and the next one's coming up as well. They all look really incredible.
It's amazing.
Well, and I would also like to give a shout out to Beth Morris.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
In the UK. And she's pretty much our go-to artist now for all of our kind of standard editions, as well as doing a lot of our slipcase editions. And I think, in particular, her work here on Savage Hunt of King Stakh, with the image of the really eerie image of the skull-headed rider, to me captures the kind of metaphysical folk horror essence of the movie itself. So we love all of the work that Beth has done. She also designs the disc art and the booklets for us, and does a wonderful job. So we can't say enough good things.
Yeah, she essentially handles all of our graphic design work now.
Awesome.
So yeah, all the booklets, and she does all of the standard edition covers, and yeah, and the King Stakh cover is a perfect example of you get a really good graphic designer, and she intuitively knew less is more. It's just the image, and it works so well. The King Stakh, artwork wise, I think both the standard and the deluxe editions are just home runs.
Speaking of the booklet, you've got brand new essays from Walter Chaw from Film Freak Central, and he's also the author of a Walter Hill film, Tragedy and Masculinity in the Films of Walter Hill. That book is fantastic for anyone who's a fan of Hill. It's a definite must-read. I love Walter Chaw's writing. I'm so glad he's involved with this.
100%. I don't know if it was the first thing I read of his, but he wrote a lengthy, incredible review of Everything Everywhere All at Once that literally had me in tears. And I was like, wow, okay, if you can write a movie review that makes me cry, you're good. So I reached out to him, and I was just like, hey, would you be interested in doing like an essay for us? And he was like, oh yeah, I've been following what you guys are doing, like anything I could do to support what you guys are doing, 100%. And so he wrote a few essays for us, and then at one point I was like, hey, would you be interested in doing an essay for all of our releases? And he's like, sure. Yeah, I'm the biggest fan of his writing.
So moving forward, basically all of the slipcase editions will feature generally 2 essays, one by Walter, and then another by different circle of writers, scholars we work with. But like Beth, Walter has kind of become part of our kind of go-to list of collaborators.
Yeah, your other essay in this release is by film historian and Professor Peter Rollberg from the Historical Dictionary of Russian and Soviet Cinema, which that just sounds like a perfect fit for this. He's also been on a couple other releases, Ruslan and Ludmila and The Tale of Tsar Sultan. This is a stacked release. And the fact that the deluxe edition is 33, I think, on Diabolic when I looked.
That sounds right.
Okay.
33, or it might be like $33.99. So
yeah, something like. But yeah,
technically 34.
you're getting a lot for your money with that. But if you want to shell out a little bit more, there's also a bundle which includes a deluxe edition and some goodies, such as a trading card, Deaf Crocodile sticker, a film-specific coin that is a numbered edition, and a set of 5 film-specific postcards. So, as I said, all of that's available on Diabolic DVD. You've got standard edition, deluxe edition, and bundle.
And I have to say that the coin is really cool. I mean, it's an actual coin. It's a minted metal coin. And because everything ties back to my being a comic book nerd, I got the idea to do a coin I supported a Kickstarter a while back that was for a release of a Bernie Wrightson book.
Oh, Cycle of the Werewolf. I did that too.
Oh, not the Cycle of the Werewolf. It was the one that had all of his. He did 2 sets of trading cards, and it was all the artwork from those cards in a book. I don't think I was even expecting it, but when I got the stuff, there was this really cool coin that came with it, and I was like, "How did they do that? Like, that's incredible!" So I started looking online, and I'm like, oh, you can get custom coins made. And I was like, oh, we're doing this.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's Nakatomi that releases the Bernie Wrightson stuff. He works with his wife. But yeah, I love the coins.
The coins are very cool. I mean, it's like, it's just weird. It's like, it's a legit coin. So yeah, the coin is again, goes back to me being a comic book nerd.
So let's get into the film itself a little bit, but before getting into any sort of specifics, Craig and Dennis, what is your history with the film? The first time you saw it? Have either of you programmed it in the past?
I heard about the film, oh my gosh, over 30 years ago. I think I came across it in a catalog from the old Los Angeles Film Exposition, which was held here in LA from the early 70s to the early 80s. And I never went to myself, but it kind of morphed 2 of the main figures behind Filmex, Gary Essert and Gary Abrams, founded the American Cinematheque, which I started work at in 1992, first as their head of programming, and then many years later came back and was the executive director there for a couple of years. And it was in a Filmex catalog with, I think, 1 or 2 photos and a description of the movie. And I thought, oh, wow, this sounds amazing, kind of occult and mysterious. I loved the title. And there was no way to see it. And so I have a little kind of mental list in the back of my head of titles that are really rare and or impossible to see that I would love to track down. And so that kind of sat on this little mental list for literally decades. I think Robert Skotak, who's a good friend of mine, is the Academy Award-winning visual effects artist from Aliens and Terminator 2, and he did Coppola's Dracula and many, many other. The other night we're watching Tremors, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Robert did the visual effects for Tremors. And I texted him, and he's like, oh yeah, that was great fun. So I think Robert was also a big fan and proponent of Savage Hunt of King Stakh, and he, like Tim Lucas and Stephen Bissett and the late Alan Upchurch, were really far ahead of the curve in identifying a lot of these really remarkable genre films by directors like Mario Bava or Patushko, and many others that had slipped through the cracks. And so I give a shout out to all of these like pioneering film scholars and film lovers, because you can go back and discover, oh yeah, a couple decades ago, Alan Upchurch was writing these incredible long essays about Patushko's work that Tim and Donna published in Video Watchdog, for example. And sadly, Alan died during the AIDS crisis, and it really deprived all of us of an amazing film scholar who was into, Italian Gothic horror and these Russian fantasy films. But Robert Skotak, I think, was a big fan of Savage Hunt of King Stakh. So it stayed on that little list in the back of my mind. And then finally, oh wow, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, started trying to locate the film. We were working with a good friend of mine, Oliver Lotsky with Seagull Films, who we've co-presented the release with, and Alla and I had put together a touring retrospective of Alexander Patushko's Soviet fantasy films in the early 2000s when I was programming for the American Cinematheque, and then a series of Russian fantastica sci-fi films that also toured the country. And I believe it was through Alla that we were able to finally make contact with someone at Belarus Film. And it took a long time to negotiate the rights. And we were finally able to secure a deal and get the materials. And it's one of those things where something is hypothetical for years and years until finally, you receive the materials. And it's kind of like, I don't really believe this is happening. And even then, there was a long process because Craig had to again work his wizardry on the materials themselves to restore them to a place where we were happy with it. We were also very lucky that we got the 2-hour director's cut version, because I think it was initially released in a much shorter version. So not usually when somebody puts out a director's cut, the shorter version is really well known. They're like, oh, we've already seen this shorter, but oh, look, here's in this case, we've never heard of this film, and you're getting the director's cut. You're getting the long version. So we're sort of starting from scratch with, So that's sort of the backstory, how we went looking for King Stakh. I guess it's the savage and very lengthy hunt for King Stakh itself. On our part, but it was almost 30 years of thinking about and then trying to track down this film. So we're really, really excited that it's finally seeing the light of day and can share it with other people, because we love it.
It's a great movie. There's quite often a lot of projects I work on, I don't really get to see them until I'm done my work. So I had, a lot of times Dennis will suggest a film and there may be a screener link or a really bad YouTube video. And a lot of time, I just trust Dennis. And so I'll scrub through it. I'll watch the beginning and then just kind of skip through it and be like, yeah, that looks great, which was the case with this one. And so it wasn't really until I was doing the QC for the Blu-ray where I sat and I watched the whole thing, and afterwards I was like, damn, that was really good. Yeah, King Stakh is terrific, because I've always been a big fan of like the Hammer films, and it's even from the very beginning when I just saw some clips of it, it just immediately reminded me of a Hammer film visually, and it feels like something Hammer might have put out, and it's so good. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it absolutely gives that off at the very beginning, with the scholar arriving at this large remote estate in a rainstorm. I was immediately like, oh, Hammer vibes. And then Lance and I always joke about, like, whenever there's a fire on a house on fire at the end of a movie, I'm like, it's a Hammer movie.
Yeah,
it's a Hammer movie.
That's how it ends.
Yeah, well, and it was kind of late in the day, because this was made in the late 70s, 1979, by Valery Rubinchik. And it was based on a novel which I have not read yet, by Vladimir Karatkevich, who was a Belarusian novelist. And this is probably his best-known book, which came out in the mid-1960s. So it was adapted about 15 years later as a film, and this is probably the best-known Belarusian film, which of course is ironic because Savage Hunt of King Stakh is so obscure.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we're talking about it. So to say it's the best-known Belarusian film is kind of I don't know. Is that an oxymoron? Is that the right or contradiction?
A low bar.
Contradiction in terms. Hopefully, it'll increase interest in other Belarusian movies. But it's also referred to as one of the only Soviet-era horror films, along with VIY, which is an extremely eerie vampire-related movie that Tushka was involved with, helping the filmmakers. It has some wonderful visual effects. But Russian Fantastica, or Soviet Fantastica, is this very broad term that encompasses everything from folklore and fantasy to science fiction to horror. And of those genres, by far, the least common was horror. There are very, very few Soviet-era horror films, and a number of scholars say that this, which was made in Belarus, which was part of the Soviet Union at the time, and V are the only real Soviet-era horror movies. And as we can kind of talk about, this is actually more in the folk horror genre because it involves folklore. The hero, the protagonist, is a folklorist who is studying ancient myths and legends, and comes to the mansion of the Marsh Firs, which just the name alone I love.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's fantastic. To research the legend of King Stakh, who supposedly thunders across the nearby moors with his ghostly horsemen. And the wild hunt, which is referred to in the title of the movie, is a fixture of Eastern European folklore. So it's existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, which Karatkevich, who wrote the novel, was incorporating, kind of inspired by when he wrote this. So the wild hunt of these ghostly figures thundering across the plains has existed in various stories and oral histories and myths in Eastern Europe for centuries and centuries, which is a wonderful thing that this kind of ties into, because it doesn't just exist in a vacuum. The wild hunt is a sort of primal, I guess in Joseph Campbell terms, a foundational myth of the region in which this is set. So there's so many wonderful kind of connections and tendrils that this movie is part of. And it's just visually so beautiful. It also reminds me of Euro horror in a way. There's a bit of the surreal, grotesque black humor of Terry Gilliam at times. And again, because it was made in the late 70s, it almost feels like it's a little bit out of time, that it should have been made circa like 67, 68.
It definitely feels like it was made earlier than it was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that also makes it a really interesting outlier. If you think of the kinds of genre films that were being made in the late 70s, which is when you're seeing Alien and all sorts of, what to us sort of feel very modern genre films. And then you look at something like The Savage Hunt of King Stakh with this kind of eerie, kind of trapped in time, story of this decaying mansion and this decaying family that inhabit it. So yeah, we love the film. The imagery, so strange and surreal. I'm so glad that people are going to get a chance to discover this wonderful film. I think it's the only, Rubinchik, who directed a number of other films, but I think this might be the only sort of out and out genre or horror film that he made. Also, again, people are like, this is Valery Rubinchik's best known movie. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy, because almost nobody knows King Stakh. But hopefully it will inspire people to try and track down some of his other movies and look into his work more.
I think this movie has that I think a lot of people can appreciate, and that for certain people is having more atmosphere and style than a clear narrative story that's happening. And so if you can get down with that, you're going to be right at home with this. And especially in the first half of the film, where we're just being introduced to everything that you're seeing is sort of eye candy in a way, but also like very reminiscent of once they get inside the home, it's dark and it's overgrown with vines. It reminded me of the Hourglass Sanatorium. There's this flooded basement or like lower level of the home, and so everything. It's literally, you have this feeling that it's sinking literally and metaphorically. But there's so much going on with it. But I think a lot of, for me, we just came off of Junesploitation, so we've been watching a bunch of like trash exploitation movies for a month straight, and so then jumping into this, I had to like adjust my brain for the first hour, where I was like, okay, I'm reading subtitles. Okay, wow, it was a lot for me to take in the first hour, and then when it gets to part 2 and it kicks off with the man just spontaneously bleeding from his head, and Mrs. Kulsa, the rooster lady, shows up, and she's my favorite. And like the little man emerges from the dollhouse, and
that's one of my favorite.
It's just
moments.
The puppet show is
the puppet show.
That's
puppet show.
It's a work of art.
Yeah.
It's choreographed perfectly.
My family, when I was very young, briefly ran a puppet theater in Canada. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania originally, but we lived for a little while in North Bay, Ontario, and while we were there, ran a puppet theater. And so I love puppetry and any film with a puppet theater, images of puppets, Fanny and Alexander, you name it. It's like, I love that. Yeah. So when we saw this, I was like, bammo.
You got to do it because there's a puppet show.
Crazy puppets. Yeah, I love
a little bit of unintentional trivia. The actor who plays the little man, he also plays the wizard in Ruslan and Ludmilla, and he's also in Kin Zsa Zsa. So we've unintentionally released 3 of his films.
Or intentionally without being completely cognizant of it. There are these. Yeah, we'll discover that sort of after the fact.
I actually discovered it listening to Steven's commentary. He mentioned it in the commentary, and I was like, really? I go online, I'm like, oh my god, he was in 3 of our films.
Oh my god, he played Chernomor, the evil wizard in Ruslan as well. Well, another kind of crazy linkage is that we're about to put out our third film featuring amazingly strange and wonderful creature makeup effects by Jan Schwankmajer, the legendary Czech animator and filmmaker, who, to pay the bills, used to do like creature makeup work for other filmmakers. So he worked on Visitor from the Arcana Galaxy, which is this incredible Croatian sci-fi fantasy film we put out last year, directed by animator Dusan Vukotic, and Schwankmajer created the Moo Moo Monster, which is insane, mutated, like trauma by way of Sid and Marty Krofft creature that interrupts a wedding banquet and decapitates all of the people there while a blind accordion player is banging away on the squeeze box. Incredible sequence. And then he also did amazing kind of steampunk-esque props and visual effects for the two Oldrich Lipsky Czech films, Mysterious Castle and the Carpathians, and then Adela Has Not Had Supper Yet, and created the beautiful, very eerie, Audrey-like carnivorous plant that is the title creature in Adela Has Not Had Supper Yet.
The steampunk gadgetry in both Mysterious Castle and Adela Has Not Had Supper Yet they're very cool.
And we tried.
The designs are so cool.
We made a valiant attempt to get Schwankmajer to talk to us, and the response was no. No, he's not interested. He's not interested in talking about those movies. They were just commercial work. So
that's unfortunate.
So we were like, okay, we tried.
Yeah, that's like the biggest highlight for me too. Is it's all building to this absolutely chaotic ending where, and I don't want to spoil it because I know we're going to have a lot of people who are listening to this who haven't watched it yet, because we are releasing this like right as the physical releases have arrived and are starting to get shipped out. So the ending is just absolute chaos with horses running around and these creatures that have been I don't want to say too much because I'll give it away, but my God, when we got to the end, I was like, holy shit, this is madness. It's perfect.
It's like it's like Wicker Man level of the ending is super folk horror.
Yeah.
Which I love about it is like, oh yeah, he really nailed the landing, I guess, as they would say in gymnastics.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't want to give away too much, but I really think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I love the fact, like you were saying, like there's subtext going on. It's not just surface level, like creepy horror story. And so, like all the fall of the aristocracy is just it's kind of more what the movie's about, really. And I have to say, it wasn't a completely conscious idea, but the standard edition cover artwork, where it's got the splash of blood, it was intended to be a splash of blood, but then I was looking at it and I was like, it kind of looks like red wine, which is kind of like, also symbolic of like the aristocracy is like spilt their wine. It's like they're falling apart, which I thought fit the film on multiple levels. And I was like, that's it. I do love that there's layers to enjoy in the film. I mean, you can't just watch it as a folk horror film without any subtext and still enjoy it, but there's more going on.
Yeah, 100%. Like the ending specifically notes that it's the first day of the 20th century, and there's a comment earlier, I believe it's the folklore investigator, that says there's no place for apparitions in the age of steam and electricity. So you have this emphasis on the clash between science and spiritualism, fact and folklore. So yeah, there's definitely a lot going on underneath there. Lance, what were some of your standout moments, favorite parts? What were some takeaways from it?
It's all pretty much random scenes and imagery. Like, I think we already hit on that. It feels light on horror, but the whole tone and atmosphere is haunting throughout. And then you get like these little bursts of scenes that make it even creepier. Like when Mr. Colsa's widow is first introduced in the carriage, she's dressed in black, holding that black chicken, and she's always waving in her scenes passing by. It's just a creepy vibe.
Smile.
Yeah. And then, of course, when we're finally introduced to her, she puts the little chick on her head, and she's a little out of her mind. But yeah, just the scenes, the Savage Hunt finally showing up, and like the slow motion of the folklore investigator kind of running slow motion through the quagmire, and yeah, I mean, The Favorites is just getting completely lost in the visuals for 2 hours, and like forgetting you're in the real world.
Yeah.
Like that's what makes the movie so captivating to me, because I think the story is summed up really quick when the tale of the Roman Janowski and the King Stakh murder, when the servant guy, he's kind of reading the book and going through the chapters and laying out the story. That's it. That sums up the whole movie.
Yeah.
So everything else is just eye candy for an hour and a half. So I mean, it's hard to pick a favorite scene in this.
Craig or Dennis, any other points you want to bring up or favorite elements of the film?
No, I think you hit a lot of them. The puppet show, of course, is the one that always kind of sticks out in my mind. And I have to say, I am a sucker for stories about decaying houses, sort of decaying families, and this is absolutely one of them.
I've seen a lot of comparisons to like the Corman Poe cycle, so like obviously House of Usher comes to mind with something like this for sure.
Yeah, it was just a kind of incredible visual that the house is literally sinking. So if you go downstairs, it's underwater.
Yeah,
like it's. And the whole the tone and feeling across the whole film is so. There's just like a feeling of, I don't know, dread.
Yeah,
you just know like this is all bad.
Well, I had read that at least in the novel, what we're watching is essentially a flashback. It's a story being told by the main protagonist, who's like 96 years old, and he's kind of sharing this real life story that he encountered. And when I read that, I was like, it kind of feels like, as you're watching it, like a fuzzy memory.
Yeah,
almost.
It
does. Yeah, like things are being almost exaggerated. It's very fairy tale.
And there's a visual trick that's used throughout the entire film. I almost hesitate to mention it because once you know it, it's hard to not notice it. There's something obscuring your vision in every single shot. Like there's something in the foreground, whether it's reeds of grass or the camera will pass it in front of a chair and the chair blocks your view. Like there's something blocking your view pretty much in almost every shot in the film, which gives it this sense of disjointed, like you're not seeing clearly, and it's really effective.
Yeah, there's a great book. It's a nonfiction book that came out in the early 2000s by a scholar named Christopher Woodward called In Ruins, A Journey Through History, Art, and Literature. And it's about the kind of fascination with decay and ruins in literature and in art. He talks about how the romantic poets of the, Byron, Shelley, Keats era fell in love with the ruins of ancient Rome. I think of that in connection with this film very particularly. For anyone who loves these kinds of movies, the cinema of decay, that's a great book, In Ruins, to track down.
That's awesome. Great recommendation. So I think we've given our listeners plenty of reasons to check this film out, but we can give them a few more with some double feature picks to go. So, Craig, let me start with you. If you were pairing this with another film for a screening, what would you pair it with?
My first instinct was to say, like, Horror of Dracula, because it's a Hammer film and visually kind of works. But I think a better pick would be Rosemary's Baby for that sense of dread that just is draped over the whole thing.
Nice, like it. Dennis, what about you?
Wow, that's a tough one. because it's a long film.
Right.
And I used to, program, still am. So you think, oh, if you got a 2-hour movie, like, what do you open with something shorter? So part of me says, pair it with something that is kind of spiritually aligned, like Harry Kumel's Malpertui, which is a film I dearly love with Orson Welles. Mm-hmm. Also about another kind of haunted Hall of Mirrors mansion, or Wojciech Haas's The Saragossa Manuscript. I know you mentioned The Hourglass Sanatorium, another great Haas film, but a double bill of Savage Hunt of King Stakh and either Malpertui or The Saragossa Manuscript, that would be a long double bill. You could pair it with something shorter, like another Hammer film I love, The Plague of the Zombies by John Gilling. Mm-hmm. Just because I love that movie, and it's also about kind of horrible, twisted aristocracy and the terrible things they do, and has a lot of really surreal, nightmarish imagery as well. So, I think probably shorter would be better. So maybe a great 90-minute Hammer movie with this would actually be a double bill you could sit through.
Okay. So. Sounds good. Craig, on the note of Dracula, so I know you shared this on Twitter, but Katie Reif highlighted this release on her Shelf Life series on Letterboxd this month, and she brought up a familiar story that I think, yeah, you're right, would work well. She wrote that, quote, King Stakh takes place before the communist era at the turn of the 20th century, amid the Gothic beauty of muddy fields, misty winter landscapes, and damp, chilly castles. The film opens on a note reminiscent of Dracula as a folklorist arrives at a remote manor home. At first, the house seems uninhabited, but it's actually the domain of a sickly heiress whose family is riddled with ghosts and curses, unquote. So, yeah, I think you're right. Dracula would work really well with it. I think there's multiple versions of it.
I was actually thinking, as after I'd answered, that Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula is also a Dracula film, but it also he highlights a lot of that. The world is changing. Mm-hmm. It's the turn of the century, and new technologies are taking over, and the old superstitions of the past are going away. So that would work well too.
Yeah, for sure.
And Craig is slipping that in because he loves Coppola's Dracula.
I love it too.
I mean, I have some serious problems with some of the casting.
Oh, sure.
I think the film lives and dies on the casting. Gary Oldman is absolutely incredible. Some of the other casting, not so much.
Yeah.
But I mean, just Gary Oldman, and visually and sonically, the score and the sound effects it's so close to perfect.
Yeah.
Just swapped out a couple actors.
It really is. All right, Lance, what about you for a double feature pick?
Yeah, so I started thinking kind of along the same lines of Dennis. I'd want to pick a short film because some of the folklore and the pacing reminded me at times of The Empty Man from 2020. It's kind of like this investigating dark legend, but that thing is longer than King Stakh, so that's out the window. But yeah, I leaned into the Gothic mystery of King Stakh, and I'm picking The Hound of the Baskervilles. I'm not going with the 1959 Tara Fisher Hammer horror, though.
No, which one are you talking about?
I'm going to take the Sidney Landfield one from 1939, starring my favorite Sherlock Holmes.
He loves Basil.
Basil Rathbone.
I love Basil too, and that's a great one. Although I got to say the Terence Fisher is probably my favorite.
Oh, I would argue this adaptation of the Arthur Conan. I mean, Peter Cushing's my favorite actor, and obviously him and Christopher Lee in the Terence Fisher one. But
the gorgeous Technicolor, palette of it, and it's such a handsome movie, and so
it really is. But the black and white from the 1939, you get you have the family curses there. Most people know the story. The swampy marshes, the foggy nights. A lot of it takes place in the family's estate, but most of it's at night outside, like in the quagmires. It's a quick 80 minutes too, so I feel like it would fit perfectly into a little, a shorter double feature with King Stakh.
Okay.
And I clearly don't program for a living because the length of the films did not cross my mind.
Yeah, Rosemary's Baby. What are you thinking?
Oh no, I still have a programmer's brain in terms of running times. So you have to think in terms of like a clock in your head, which is like, okay, the show starts at 7, but you get trailers, you get an introduction, which means it doesn't really start until like 7:15, and then it runs 126 minutes, and it's literally you're like, when does that end? And do you have a Q&A after? So it's really funny how I still will kind of immediately revert to that kind of like tallying up the minutes and when does it start, when does it end.
Yeah, I mean, it still sounds amazing to have like, sit at your home and watch 2.5 hour movies back to back. I mean, that's in your own home. Like with no.
This.
I mean, we did the extended edition Lord of the Rings trilogy in a day before, so
yeah, there you go. It's possible.
It is possible.
Or
two long movies is no big
iClaudius.
deal.
You can watch. I have in the past watched all of iClaudius in a day. I think that's 12 or 13 hours. But we live in an incredible era. There was I listened to an interview on NPR a few years ago with a media analyst who said we live in an incredible era to be a content consumer and a really challenging era to be a content creator, because if you're a consumer, there's so many opportunities. I mean, just the fact that you can now see gorgeous restorations of 15 or 20
Shanks.
Paul Nashi movies, or Shanks, or Savage Hunt of King Stakh, or any number of incredibly rare and obscure, art house and genre films, stuff that's coming out on 4K UHD. Which we're starting to do as well. That's amazing for $25-$30 for a disc. That's incredible. I think what's really challenging is if you are a content creator, if you're an artist, if you're a filmmaker, a musician, a writer, how do you actually monetize that and see any of the revenue stream from your creation? So I think this is a great era for consumers, which is wonderful. But also as a content creator, I've produced and written and directed films and written books, etc. I see challenges to even like pay the bills and sustain a career as a creator of content. And I'm also very aware that, a lot of the films we put out, the creators are long gone. A number of them passed away in relative obscurity or financial hardship. Sal Watts, Solomon King, Alexander Petrushko. Apparently at the end of his life, having, his career paralleled the entire history of Soviet cinema from the late 20s until the early 70s. But I think when he died, he was not well off. So we celebrate the work of these artists, but it is worth remembering that many of them, created under very difficult conditions, Rubinchik during the Soviet era of a lot of repression and censorship, as well as Petrushko and others, and in the end of the day, our work is only there to sort of illuminate their creativity. Had Vladimir Karakevich not written the novel and Valery Rubinchik not adapted it into a film, we wouldn't have the Savage Hunt of King Stakh to talk about. So I want to kind of end paying tribute to their sort of primary creative work in writing the book that was adapted into the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's end there with let's talk about what you guys have upcoming, that at least what you can share. Any screenings, future releases, anything else that you want to let our listeners know about?
Well, we're screening The Savage Hunt of King Stakh at the end of August out here in Los Angeles for any listeners in the LA area at the Philosophical Research Society in Los Feliz, co-presented with Astral Eyes of Bibliomancers. So you can see it on the big screen if you go to prs.org. And in terms of other films, wow, so many movies. Craig, you want to talk about October, November, December, beyond?
Well, I mean, the benefit of you and I being the only people that own the company, we can say whatever we want. So yeah, I don't know how deep into the backlog you want to get, but
well, as much as you're, whatever you've announced so far that you're willing to share and that you want to promote and get people excited about, if you want to just, promote a couple that are coming up, or as much as you want.
Well, I mean, October, we've already announced the titles that are coming out. Well, these titles we've already announced. So Trapped Ashes, which is an anthology horror film written and produced by Dennis Bartok.
I know that guy.
Yeah. He seems pretty good guy. I actually just yesterday was looking at the Tyler's color grade of reels 1 through 4. It looks incredible. So that's coming out. That one we're planning for October for obvious reasons.
That is one of our first true horror movies.
Yeah.
I did it in the mid 2000s with Joe Dante and Ken Russell and Monty Hellman and Sean Cunningham from Friday the 13th and John Gata all directed episodes. So we're putting out a new 4K restoration, and I think it's going to be our first 4K UHD plus Blu-ray release.
Oh, nice.
For that.
Nice.
I'm excited for that one.
Tons of extras, beautiful new slipcase art by an artist named Hans Woody. I think it's going to look great.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a fun movie. I mean, it's I don't know. I was reading some stuff online about it, and people were trying to take it too seriously. It's just it's a fun horror flick, and it's visually I don't know it's got some really great camera work and cinematography. There's some really beautiful shots in this thing, and I'm looking forward to having a nice new disc of that myself.
If you're into folk horror, the film we're putting out in November is an incredible Irish folk horror folklore movie called The Outcasts, written and directed by Robert Wynne Simmons, who's a British filmmaker, probably best known for writing the script to Blood on Satan's Claw, which is one of the kind of essential British folk horror movies of the early 70s. And this he made in the early 80s in Ireland. And it's set in the early 1800s about a young woman who is accused of kind of witchcraft and consorting with the fairy folk. And it's about superstition and folklore and witchcraft and ghosts, and it kind of feels like an ancient ballad somehow committed to film, and it is a truly wholly remarkable movie. Incredible score, incredible performances. Was just recently restored by the Irish Film Institute, so we're putting it out for the first time in the U.S. along with a bunch of very rare early 8mm short films that were directed by Robert Wynne Simmons when he was a teen. Oh my God, he was so ambitious. He went out and shot these 20, 30-minute supernatural amateur films with his friends, including one that was shot in this, speaking of abandoned mansions, in a decaying mansion that was once owned by Mary Shelley, writer of Frankenstein.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like a ghost story sort of inspired by her work, with he and his friends literally climbing around the roofs and the chimneys of this abandoned house with holes in the roof and everything. This is great. So we got a bunch of great extras for that, including an interview with Robert Wynne Simmons. in December. We have announced Felidae. So, Craig, do you want to talk about Felidae?
Yeah, Felidae is one of the rare films that I kind of was like championing, because, like I said, most of the time our releases are come from Dennis's deep well of incredible film knowledge. I happened to see this movie and was just, I'm a huge cat fanatic. Speaking of which, somehow she just got in here, and yeah, it was like this. It looks like a children's movie, and then you watch it, and you're like, oh, that is so not a children's movie, and it's just really incredible. So we spent a long time like tracking down who had the rights was quick. Negotiating with them and convincing them to let us do a restoration and a release was not. That seemed like it took forever. But once we finally got that settled, we were able to get the original camera negative 4K scans, and I've started work on those, and it looks incredible. Like, it's to be able to have like 4K scans from the original negative. The negative was starting to deteriorate on a chemical level, but picture-wise, like, it still looks fantastic. Yeah, it's gonna. I'm super excited about. It's gonna be just a stunning release.
And that is sort of like an R-rated Don Bluth movie. If you can imagine like an R-rated An American Tail or Secret of Nim.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like the animation looks like Don Bluth because a lot of the animators came from Don Bluth.
But it's like the Plague Dogs or Watership Down, where there's
I mean, there's animals being gutted and there's
kitty sex,
cats having sex. Like it's
not for kids.
It's not.
But it looks
kids.
like a kids movie,
right? And it was in the crazy. They marketed it to kids when it first came out, and they had parents like dragging the kids and they were just walking out of the theater.
What is this? Oh my god!
So they're like, yeah. So it didn't do all that well when it came out because they were like, well, you marketed it to kids.
And I don't think it ever came out here in the States. It's it is a horror film. It's kind of an occult horror, kitty detective.
Yeah, like a detective mystery.
Yeah, but with a lot of horror elements, catacombs filled with thousands of dead cat skeletons and all, and a Boy George theme song.
Oh,
yes.
Lance is in.
I'm into
Yeah,
that.
it's
Kitty
wild.
sex,
The whole
Boy
movie's
George.
It's wild that the whole movie's in German, and then the opening title sequence with the song is Boy George in English, and it's just an incredible movie. And
then I don't know if,
as far as the artwork goes, we really lucked out getting in touch with a lot of the people that were involved in making the film, and we got in touch with the original character design artist, and he's given us just a plethora of sketches and drawings and behind the scenes stuff. So the book with this one is going to just be so full of amazing stuff. But he also agreed to do a new painting for the slipcase, and he did it he did it as though it were animated. So he did like a full painting background with a acetate overlay with the characters as though it's animation. So that's what the slipcase artwork will be. Will be this new painting with the animated cats as the artwork. Yeah, I'm so excited about this one.
I don't think we've announced this one yet, so this might be the Golden Fern. I don't think we've announced that yet, have we?
No, I don't think so.
All right, so we'll announce it here. Also in December, we're putting out this amazing black and white early 60s Czech kind of fairy tale, very dark fairy tale kind of folklore movie directed by Jiří Weiss, who was a wonderful Czech director, and it is about a kind of a young woodsman who has a beautiful forest fairy fall in love with him, and he kind of heedlessly throws her love away and goes off to war and falls in love with another woman. And it also has elements of Wojciech Haas and the Saragossa manuscript, and it's just a visually stunning black and white Czech fantasy film that, again, is almost completely unknown.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if it qualifies as horror, but it only has 228 views on Letterboxd.
It is more kind of dark adult fantasy folklore, but if you like Eastern European films of that era, like the Saragossa manuscript or others, then I think you will love The Golden Fern. So that's another one that we're really excited to be putting out.
That sounds amazing. I'm into it.
You heard it here first.
You heard it, and you heard it here first. Hello.
And we've got so much else. Oh my God, have us back on, and we're now building up a backlog. We're getting close to having more films we haven't released than we have. Not quite, but we're getting close.
Well, yeah, it's darn close.
Oh my gosh!
As of earlier this week, we now have 16 animated films that we haven't released yet.
Oh boy!
This is
so yeah. So like I said, by this time next year, everyone's going to be like, "Oh yeah, they put out all those animated films."
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was that many. Yeah, we got a lot of films. We got a lot of films in our backlog. We're actually going to start doing 2 releases a month for some months.
Okay, we're going to try.
We're going to try. Poor Craig is like, oh my God, how am I going to survive? And then we're also going to be doing some 2-disc sets. We're doing in early 2025. We'll be doing a 2-disc set of 2 amazing early 1970s DEFA, D-E-F-A, East German space operas, sci-fi films. One of them newly restored in 6K from 70 millimeter. Putting out 2 films by this wonderful Romanian female fantasy director, including one of the most jaw-dropping musicals you will ever see. Kind of like Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats on Acid. Oh my God. You've never in your wildest, darkest dreams will have seen something this crazy. We actually have 2 unbelievably bonkers Eastern European musicals coming out next year. I don't know what it is that suddenly we've got this little mini genre of totally deranged, surreal, and wonderful Eastern European kind of glam rock musicals. But
yeah,
like early 70s sort of Andrew Lloyd Webber, Jesus Christ Superstar inspired, with really wildly inappropriate choreography and costumes and production design. Just amazing. So we're very excited.
Yeah.
It's not all animation, actually. There's a lot of crazy live action stuff we've got coming down the pipe, and we just hope people, buy them and enjoy them.
I will.
That's why we do this.
Yeah.
To shine a light on these great films and filmmakers.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate all the work that you guys are doing with all of these releases, and I'm excited about, what's to come. So for our listeners, we will put links in show notes to where you can pick up their latest releases. You can find past releases on Diabolic. Does your site, deafcrocodile.com, does that just redirect to Diabolic, or can they buy direct?
You can buy direct.
Okay.
So all of our stuff is available through Diabolic or direct, and it'll be popping up in other retail, like other retailers online will be carrying our stuff as well.
Yeah, like Orbit, all the ones that folks are familiar with, and great.
Amazon, I think people still be able to order King Stakh soon via Amazon in the standard edition, but the special slipcase and the bundles you'll only be able to get through us or Diabolic.
Right.
So.
All right, sounds great. Dennis and Craig, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of this information, and for just, like I said, like what you do.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you enjoy it. That's why we do it.
Yeah. You mentioned, Dennis, that it's a good time to be a consumer, and it's a great time to be just a film fan with with labels like you guys releasing what you do. So thanks to you and Craig.
Yeah, I mean, I tune into Ryan's Disconnected show every Thursday night, and like every single week, it's just like there's a good large handful of titles that are coming out on disc, and I'm like, oh damn, I want that.
Yeah.
Well, you guys just listed a bunch that's added to my list.
Right,
so
yeah.
The Golden Fern, I mean, it's
There's such a glut. We can't take it. It's too much.
Oh, yeah. Just look up some of the images from the Golden Fern and your jaw.
Yeah, the cinematography in that is really beautiful.
God, black and white. I think it's scope. It like that. I'm a huge sucker for black and white scope as well. So whenever I see that, I'm like, it's amazing. But, another thing, just in closing, your fans should keep in mind is, most of the companies like us that license these films, they're for 5 or 7 years. And in many cases, if those licenses expire, they may not be renewed, or, we've all know of beloved companies that have folded in the past few years, Twilight Time and others. So, just the fact that something is out on Blu-ray doesn't mean it's always going to be available. In fact, for a lot of these films, they won't. So, not to break people's budgets, but, buy them while they're available.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you can, if you love it, support small businesses and these boutique Blu-ray labels who are putting out amazing, amazing stuff. Thank you again, Craig and Dennis. Listeners, will be back after this quick break with Lance's pick for next episode.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, Lance. Oh, wait, I realized after we said goodbye, I didn't give my double feature pick.
Yeah, I was wondering that you immediately jumped to me.
No, I normally, when it's my pick, we go, anyway.
Okay.
But yeah, I didn't want to, after Dennis had closed out, I didn't want to circle back. It seemed weird. So anyway, my double feature pick is a Hammer film. It's under 90 minutes, so it fits a lot of the criteria that we talked about. Captain Clegg, a.k.a. Night Creatures from 1962. This one leans a bit heavier on the adventure side of the genre spectrum, having pirates and thieves, but I think it would be a good counterbalance here. It's about a pirate named Captain Clegg that was buried in the Romney Marshes. We have marshes near the village of Dim Church. A great fucking name for a town. The marshes are now haunted by the marsh phantoms, these skeleton ghost riders. So it's more of a narrative element connection, plus also being a Hammer film and under 90 minutes. So I think it would work great for a double feature here.
Perfect one. Another Peter Cushing. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Next pick. Where are we going, Lance?
Okay. So for anyone who listened to the Junesploitation episode, the very long one, I dropped a few hints of potential picks for future episodes. And I'm going to go ahead and pick one right now. I'm going to pick one from the Cars theme. And that was Death Car on the Freeway from 1979.
Hell yes.
Yes, I was. You seemed excited when I mentioned it, so it was a no-brainer. It's a TV movie directed by stuntman Hal Needham, who directed the first 2 Smokey and the Bandit films. But it's about a black glove-wearing maniac who drives a rape van on the LA freeway and selects lone women drivers on the road to harass and cause them to crash, killing them. And a reporter starts investigating. And guess what? She likes to drive alone on the freeway. So could she be the mysterious driver's next victim? Watch it and find out. A great cast, great action. I called it a Giallo on wheels. Mm-hmm. And I had mentioned in our Junesploitation episode that no one will figure out who the killer is.
I can't wait. It's the car.
Okay, so Death Car on the Freeway currently has 359 views on Letterboxd, and there are a few decent uploads to watch on YouTube.
Okay.
I think some better than others, but pick your favorite.
Okay. We'll put a link to one of them in show notes, as well as our Discord, which you should join. We have a link to that in show notes. Also, where you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Unsung Horrors. You can follow me at Hex Massacre, Letterboxd, Instagram, and Twitter.
Follow me at El Schibi, Instagram, and Letterboxd.
Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks again to Craig and Dennis for joining us. We hope everyone checks out some of the stuff that Deaf Crocodile is doing. They're doing great work over there.
Yes, for sure.
Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next episode.
Bye.
I am Adam Lundy, co-host of They Live by Film, a podcast dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. Every week, my co-hosts Chris Haskell, Zach Bryant and I discuss a wide range of films, from monumental classics like Vertigo and The Rules of the Game, to the craziest, schlockiest movies ever made like Deathbed and everything in between. We are also lucky enough to have sat down with some of the biggest players in the boutique Blu-ray and film restoration game. If this is your thing, then come hang out with us every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, wherever you normally stream your podcasts, and now as part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.